Hi, it's Knuckle. As the season of autumn is fast approaching, let's read the poem After Apple Picking by Robert Frost. Known for its irregular form and rhyme scheme, this poem explores themes of working and resting, waking and sleeping, life and death. As with much of Frost's work, the poem also explores the theme of man and the environment. We'll read through the whole poem first before diving in. After Apple Picking by Robert Frost. My long two-pointed ladder is sticking through a tree, towards heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill. Beside it, and maybe 2 or 3, apples I didn't pick upon some bough, but I am done with apple picking now. The scent of apples I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight I got from looking through a pane of glass. I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break. But I was upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of the ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. For I've had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of this great harvest I myself desired. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down, and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap, as of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep.
Okay, so let's take this line by line. My long two-pointed ladder is sticking through a tree, towards heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill. Beside it, and maybe 2 or 3, apples I didn't pick upon some bough, but I am done with apple picking now. Okay, the first thing to note about this poem is the rhymes. The rhymes are very strong and noticeable, so we can even just notice a few from the first stanza. Still and fill, bow and now, tree and 3. But there isn't any kind of regular rhyming pattern in this poem. And to me, it reminds me of apple picking. Finding apples is like finding rhymes, finding these more or less identical red or yellow treasures in a sea of green leaves. When you find apples, you find one, and then another, at unexpected moments. And here the rhymes are coming to us at unexpected moments too. Towards heaven, so death is probably a prominent theme in this poem, as it is in many poems. And there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3. So he's apple picking, and there's a barrel beside his ladder that he hasn't filled. If this poem is about death, then it might be that there's something he didn't accomplish before death. There might be 2 or 3 apples he didn't get to pick upon some bough, and this barrel that's unfilled next to him. Okay, let's continue. So essence of winter sleep is on the night. The scent of apples I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight I got from looking through a pane of glass. I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break, but I was upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. So essence of winter sleep is on the night. So winter sleep could be like hibernation, right, which animals do, but also humans do to some degree, because in the winter we start to spend most of our days indoors and maybe become a bit more sedentary. But winter sleep could again bring us back to the theme of death. I'm thinking of another famous poem by Robert Frost, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening, which is about winter, and it ends with the famous lines, "And miles to go before I sleep," where sleep could symbolize death. And winter is in many ways a season of death. The leaves have fallen off the trees, leaving them looking dead and barren. If autumn is the season where all the fruit of spring and summer are finally born and harvested, then winter is the season after that. It's the season after apple picking, which is what this poem is about. It's about after apple picking. After autumn, winter. After a hard day's work, sleep. After life, death. You also have night here. Essence of winter sleep is on the night. So we're getting to the end of the day. This poem could be about sleep or about death or about both. In some ways, it could be said that we die each night when we go into the stages of deep dreamless sleep, when we go unconscious and are born again each morning. Night is also interesting to me because it brings back to mind the poem I mentioned before, Stopping by the Woods on a Snowy Evening. So that poem is also about winter and about night or evening. It's also about sleep and also about death and about the responsibilities and life lived before death, the apples picked and not picked, the barrels filled and unfilled. The scent of apples, I am drowsing off. So this is interesting because it's a bit interruptive, right? And this is how sleep comes to us. The scent of apples is lulling him to sleep, and then the sudden recognition that, oh, I'm drowsing off. Essence of winter sleep is on the night. The scent of apples, I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass. I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough, and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break. So this morning he looked through a pane of glass that he skimmed from a drinking trough. So a drinking trough is a container for animals to drink water from, and to skim is like to skim cream from milk, to scoop what's floating at the top. So the pane of glass here might be the ice. He skimmed a piece of ice from the top of a drinking trough and looked through it, holding it against the world of hoary grass. The world of hoary grass is the world we live in. This part of the passage is interesting because I think it brings us to the theme of nature and possibly even Frost's relationship with nature and how Frost sees the natural world. I say possibly Frost's relationship because Frost is the poet, but not necessarily the speaker of this poem. He's not necessarily the person doing the apple picking. But nonetheless, I can imagine Frost himself picking up a piece of ice and looking at the world through it. There is a famous poem of his that goes, "The way a crow shook down on me, the dust of snow from a hemlock tree, has given my heart a change of mood, and saved some part of a day I rued." So he was mesmerized by little things in nature, like a bit of dust of snow shaking down on you from a crow. Robert Frost shares some characteristics with the Romantics. And for instance, William Blake's Auguries of Innocence begins, "To see a world in a grain of sand, and heaven in a wildflower, to hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour." And here the speaker is literally seeing the world in a piece of ice and holding it in his hand. The other reason I say this points to Frost's relationship with the natural world is that he refers to the world as a world of hoary grass. So this is the way that Frost sees the world. This is Frost's world. The Frost world is the world of nature, the world of hoary grass. So it melted and I let it fall and break. Again, this is something I could literally imagine Frost doing when he goes for a walk. But this is something that I think a lot of us might do, to crunch an autumn leaf, to let a piece of ice melt and break in your palm. So the theme of death possibly comes up here too. For a moment, that piece of ice was the whole world. The speaker could see the whole world through that piece of ice. And now it's broken, melted, and gone. And that's kind of like us. Each of us is a piece of ice through which the world is revealed to us. Each of us is a world, a unique way in which the universe experiences and expresses itself. And at some point, that world comes to an end. It could be that the speaker is ready to let go of life. He's ready for sleep, for death. And that's what we're coming to next. But first, let's just reread again from the top of this section. I like to reread from the top of this section because of the way the rhyme scheme works. And so we'll read again from the top of that section, and then we'll get to these lines over here that we haven't yet touched. So, essence of winter sleep is on the night. The scent of apples, I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight. I got from looking through a pane of glass. I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough, and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break. But I was upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. I really like this because this is another interruption here. This section over here is another interruption here, right? Between the rhymes, break, and take. But you can also see the lines here are visibly shorter than most of the lines in this poem. To me, it reminds me of falling asleep. I can imagine the speaker's eyes closing and his head dropping on each of these, but I was well upon my way to fall asleep before it fell, and I could tell. So it's a kind of interruption there, and this is how sleep comes to us, right? It's out of our hands. It comes when it comes, and there's no stopping it. And so it is with death too. It's also interesting that this happened in the morning on his way to going apple picking. He was already sleepy on his way to going apple picking and could tell what form his dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. Is this part describing his dreaming or the actual apple picking? Or both? I could definitely imagine myself dreaming about apples after a day of apple picking. I tend to have a lot of nature-related dreams, so I dream about autumn trees at night if I've gone for an autumn walk that day. I dream about snow at night if I've gone for a snowy walk that day. I also do get work dreams occasionally, and in this case, apple picking could represent labor or work. So this visual of magnified apples appearing and disappearing could probably be while he's dreaming. It certainly feels dreamlike. Even describing the ache of his instep arch, of his foot from standing on the ladder, I've personally experienced dreams about aches and about pain because dreams are very sensory, and this section of the poem certainly feels very sensory. It's not about things happening specifically. It's about the feeling of the ladder swaying back and forth, feeling the ache in his foot, seeing the apples appear and disappear. It's sensorial. It's about sights, feelings, and sounds. You've got the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. So this could be dreaming or it could be real, right? Load on load of apples coming in feels like a droning sound you might hear in your dreams. But it could also be that he's actually doing apple picking and that the act of apple picking itself feels dreamlike to him. Since it's repetitive, it's solitary in this case, you're ensconced in nature during the whole process. If we're each seeing the world through a piece of ice, then we're all sort of dreaming in a sense. So to live is to dream. This part of the passage could be a sort of row your boat gently down the stream, life is but a dream message. What is the line between waking and sleeping, living and dreaming, life and death? It's a question that comes up in my very favorite novel, The God of Small Things, where the narrator asks, if you've dreamed about eating fish, have you eaten fish? For I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired. Of the great harvest I myself desired. Overtired is an interesting word, not just tired, but overtired. It reminds me of the title, After Apple Picking. Overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. So it could be about the ending stages of life, the retreat from progress, from achieving, from creating, from desiring, from finding more and more apples, and instead getting ready for death or for respite. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down, and not let fall, for all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap, as of no worth. Okay, so first the 10,000 fruit to touch is a nice poetic device. It adds emphasis. Cherish in hand, lift down, and not let fall. So each of these fruit was pulled down and cherished. We cherish memories, so each of these fruit could have been like a memory in the speaker's life. Each was held in his hand and cherished. Just like with Blake saying that to hold infinity in the palm of your hand or eternity in an hour, for the instant that he was holding each of these fruit, for the instant that this speaker was holding each of those fruit, each was like an eternity and an infinity in that moment. Because each time he picked the apple, he treated it as a life or death consequence, right? Because for each one that struck the earth, it went surely to the cider apple heap, as of no worth. And that rhyme there between earth and worth is really nice. And you get both of those are kind of shorter lines compared to the rest. So that's really nice. Even that struck the earth, it's sort of like a short striking of the earth, as of no worth. And there's that rhyme there between the two. If the apple fell to the ground, it was over. So he had to put his whole life into making sure that each apple was picked well. And so there's that's what brings back the idea of him holding in his hand maybe infinity in that moment. And there were 10,000 such apples to be picked with care and cherished. Given Frost's interest in nature, I don't think it's a stretch to also consider the life cycle not only of the apple picker, but of the apples themselves, where they go after death, and what that says about where we go. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. I think it's really interesting because in some ways the speaker is like a woodchuck or some other hibernating animal. As a squirrel gathers acorns for the winter, this speaker is gathering apples. I like this enjambment here, this long sleep enjambment. There's also an enjambment over here as I describe it coming on, or just some human sleep. I really like that. But even the long sleep here, this is also an enjambment. And what does it do? So it puts long sleep onto the next line and then capitalizes the long, which distinguishes it from, say, just some human sleep in lowercase. So the long sleep of the woodchuck naturally refers to hibernation, but long sleep could also mean like the sleep, right? Which is why it's capitalized, as in death. Again, it might bring questions on what the difference is between waking and sleeping, living and dreaming, life and death. This stanza has sleep in it 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, it reminds me of stopping by the woods on a snowy evening, where the last couple of lines are, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. So the repetition of sleep here is getting you ready for sleep. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful poem, and let me know what you think.